My 38 male and my wife, 38 female, have been married for 10 years. We've raised 2 wonderful children together and we had a happy life up until she threw it all away. We met in our late 20s through a mutual friend who thought we would hit it off. He set us up on a blind date, and we instantly connected. I took her back to my apartment that night, and she never left. We were both young professionals focused on our careers and making names for ourselves. I admired her tenacity and ambition, and I knew early on that I wanted to be with her forever. Fast forward 10 years, my wife had been anticipating a huge promotion at work, so she was constantly at the office trying to put in the extra effort for it. The promotion would come with a large bonus that we planned on using to remodel our house and add a room for her mom to come live with us. I didn't think anything of her staying at the office later than normal. In hindsight, I can only wonder what happened all those nights that she didn't leave until 8 p.m. One night, she came home and told me about a conference that she was asked with 10 in Baltimore. It wasn't an unusual occurrence for her to have to travel for work, so we made the proper arrangements for me to watch over the kids by myself while she was out of town. I kissed her goodbye and told her that I would miss her when she left, and she said the same thing. The first night that she was gone, she called me over FaceTime from her hotel room. She told me about how exhausted she was and gave me some details about the conference. She looked really stressed out, which I just assumed was because it was so last minute, and she might have been unprepared. Looking back, I'm pretty sure it was because she did something with her boss that first night and felt guilty. The next day she texted me in the morning, telling me she would be busy all day and wouldn't have time to check in, but she wanted me to tell the kids that she said good morning and that she loved them. I hadn't heard from her all day, but around 10 p.m. in the evening, I got a text message from a mutual friend. This mutual friend was the one who actually set us up 10 years ago. He was a close friend of mine from college, and he worked with my wife and knew her fairly well as an acquaintance. It had been a few weeks since we last talked, so I happily picked up my phone to see what was new with him. As soon as I opened our conversation, I felt my heart sink to my stomach. He attached an image of my wife sitting at a bar, very close to her boss, with her hands on his chest and looking up at him with a smile. The message just said, "I'm not sure what's going on, but I thought you should see this." I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. I tried to rationalize why she would be in such an intimate position with him, but I couldn't think of any good reasons. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I needed more information. Right away, I found her laptop and logged in. Her emails were relatively clean. I didn't see any signs of infidelity within them, but they were mostly work-related. I closed her laptop and resolved not to worry about it until I could talk to her. I really didn't want to cause some huge blow-on argument by accusing her of something she didn't do, and I trusted her enough to come clean if she did do anything. She got home Sunday night, exhausted, and complaining about having a horrible headache from the busy, loud crowd at the conference. I climbed into bed to go to sleep shortly after she arrived. She left to take a quick shower, leaving her phone behind. I definitely tried to ignore my curiosity, but I couldn't. I quickly scanned through her phone and looked for any signs of her cheating. Specifically, I searched through her messages with her boss. I didn't see anything right away, and I felt relieved. However, before I could put the phone down, I got a push notification from a fantasy football app. For reference, my wife does not care about sports. Her having a fantasy football app was pretty strange, so I had to click on the notification. As it turned out, the app was not about fantasy football. Instead, it was a discrete messaging app with a false notification system. I found all the evidence I was looking for in that app. Her boss had texted her and told her that he enjoyed the time they spent together and couldn't wait to see her again on Tuesday. I quickly searched their other messages and figured out that the conference was the first time they slept together. Apparently, they had been talking and exchanging pictures long before then. I quickly screenshotted some of the pictures they'd exchanged and sent them to myself, deleting them from her phone so she didn't even know they were sent. She got out of the shower, and I rolled right over and pretended to fall asleep. I didn't want to talk to her about what I saw. In fact, I wanted to be as far away from her as possible. There was no chance I wanted to be with her again after finding that out. I loved her, but she completely shattered my trust in her. Divorce was the only option for me. I also knew that I wanted to get my revenge on her. Historically, I've been terrible at giving gifts for Valentine's Day and our anniversary, things like that. My wife would always tell me that I could do more to show how much I cared about her. Well, I figured I might as well take her advice. Valentine's Day was right around the corner, so I planned to humiliate her in front of her coworkers and expose her boss for what he did. I explained the situation to the company, and they helped me figure out some details. I then sent the evidence of what the boss did to HR, and he instantly got fired. Later on, I showed up to her work carrying a bouquet of yellow roses, which apparently signifies betrayal. Several of my wife coworkers gathered around while I read the message, assuming it was a declaration of my love. Instead, I served her with divorce papers and read a message telling her I knew about the affair with her boss and that it was over. The look on her face as the envelope was handed to her was priceless. We ended up filing for divorce. I kept the house, and she moved in with her mother. Now we have joint custody of our children. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. It sounds like you had a picture-perfect life before she betrayed you and threw it all away. Considering she thought ahead to use a discreet messaging app, I wonder if you would have ever found out if it hadn't been for your friend chowing you in. It does seem like she might have felt guilty at first. But even after she returned from the trip, she still didn't say anything. She was likely going to continue. I hope you recover from the breach of trust and are able to move on. Now let's move on to our next story. A little backstory. My wife, 27 female, and I have been married for 5 years, and things had been going well. We had some issues at the beginning of the pandemic due to the forced proximity, but we worked through them and came out stronger on the other side. My wife's biological father died when we were on our honeymoon. We ended up having to leave early and come back to the States to help plan for the funeral and comfort her mother. After a few years, her mom decided to start dating again. That's when she met her new husband. It took a bit of adjusting for my wife because she felt somewhat betrayed that her mother had moved on. I helped her see that her mother was still young, and she couldn't go through the rest of her life alone. At first, she didn't even care to get to know the man. He was a few years younger than her mother, but not so much as to cause concern. I guess in my wife's head, she automatically assumed the worst, and thought he was with her mom for her money. I was close with her mom as well, so I took it upon myself to try and unite the family and convince my wife to give her new stepdad a proper chance. After about a year, it seemed like she was really warming up to him. As it turned out, they had a lot in common, and they were able to find some common ground to bond over. Last summer, we invited a bunch of relatives to stay at our house for the weekend. We had just installed an in-ground pool and hot tub, so we threw a huge barbecue to put them to good use. I noticed about halfway through the evening that my wife was Mia. She was supposed to be helping me with a lot of the cooking and hosting the party. I looked everywhere for her, but I couldn't find her. About an hour after, I realized she was missing. I saw her walking up to the pool with her stepfather close behind. I walked up to them and asked where they were. They both just shrugged their shoulders, and my wife said they had gone to the small pond behind the house to see if there were any fish. I didn't think anything of it then, but now I know that is where this all started. Months passed, and my wife had been growing distant. I knew things were stressful for her at work, so part of me thought that was where it stemmed from. She was also spending more time with her stepfather, which I never thought was anything to be concerned about. He had a boat that he would take her fishing on, since that was something she used to do with her dad. The more I think about this story, the more I know Freud is rolling around in his grave, screaming that he was right. Anyway, I pulled my wife aside one weekend when she had planned on going fishing with him and told her that I felt like she was pulling away from me. I suggested we go out, just the two of us, and spend the weekend somewhere nice. She seemed reluctant to agree, but in the end, she called her stepfather and canceled. I booked us an errand at this cozy mountain lodge so we could spend some quality time along sightseeing. When I say she was glued to her phone the entire trip, believe me, she hardly took her eyes off of it. I didn't want to say anything about it, because I could sense that we would just argue about it if I did, so I kept my mouth shut. However, I was curious about what was so important. Later that afternoon, she decided to take a nap in front of the fireplace. I took the opportunity to peek at what she was up to. Right away, I was shocked by what I found. The text message exchanges between her and her stepfather were filthy. They had been sending each other pictures and scheduling dates to go out. They had been referencing things they had done on the occasions they'd been together. I realized that all of the boat trips were just an excuse for them to sleep together. Not only was I furious about what she had done to me to throw away our marriage, but I was also angry about what she had done to her mother. Her actions were completely unforgivable, and I could see no way of moving forward with her. I didn't have time to send myself any screenshots or record any of the evidence. She was a light sleeper, and I didn't want her to wake up and see me snooping at her phone. I needed to catch them in the act. That would be the only way I could divorce her and retain my assets. She woke up shortly after and immediately looked through her phone. No doubt texting her stepfather disgusting things. I faked a stomach bug so we could go back to the house and I could distance myself from her. Because we cut the trip short, she used that as an excuse to meet up with her stepfather to go fishing. I just nodded my head and told her to go for it because I didn't want to look at her. I didn't realize what opportunity was in front of me when she left, but shortly after, I realized it was the perfect time to catch her. I debated involving her mother-in-law in all of it, but in the end, I figured that she needed to know. I called her up to see what she was doing, and when I told her I wanted to grab lunch, she was more than happy. On the way there, I told her I had to drop something off for my wife at the boat. We both walked down the docks to where the boat was and boarded it. It was still at the marina, so I worried that maybe they weren't actually on the boat together. When we walked to the cabin below, we found them. We caught them in the middle of the act together. I pretended to be shocked and comforted my mother-in-law, while she digested what was happening. My wife tried to justify it by saying she was in love with him, unlike she had ever been with anyone else, but it only made things worse. I drove my mother-in-law home, leaving them both behind on the boat. I comforted her and ensured she was okay before I made any attempts to figure out what I planned to do. Eventually, she calmed down enough to call my wife and confront her. She told her over the phone that she never wanted to see her again and couldn't forgive her for what she'd done. I stayed with my mother-in-law for a couple of days so she wouldn't feel so alone. After we took all of her future ex-husband's things out of the house and changed the locks, I went home to find that my wife had left. I emailed her telling her I was filing for divorce, but she never replied. I still have no clue where she or her stepfather are, but I'm filing for a default divorce. Oh. P. I can't believe you had to go through something like this, and I am truly sorry for you and your mother-in-law. First of all, good on you for standing by her when she was going through something so difficult. It's unbelievable that her own daughter would stoop so low. It's clear that your soon-to-be ex-wife was immature and selfish. Not only did she throw away your marriage, but she also ruined her own mother's. Running away and avoiding the consequences of her actions is an immature move that is only drawing out the pain for you while you wait for the divorce. I hope you and your mother-in-law can find peace and move on with your life without them. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.